welcome to the next installment of our somewhat history-based ramblings for while playing World of Warships. I feel like right now this is pretty much all I'm prepared and able to do while still doing lots of job search stuff, by which I mean like literally putting up my resume into many job boards and calling various tutoring places around my local city, and then getting extremely depressed about that and going online and playing World of Warships. So in between last time and this time, I watched several documentary pieces about the Marshall Islands and a buildup of Ring of Pacific bases encircling China, which, depending on your political viewpoint, could be a good thing or a bad thing. But the original source documents in the YouTube documentary series called The Coming War with China, which, let's just get the author here. It's always good to include our original source documents with the full name, title, and date of these things. So let's see. It is a documentary, I believe, in John Pillager is the creator, and let's just get a date for timestamp purposes, January 12th, 2020, right? So this one is primarily focused on essentially the consequences of post-Cold War American strategy of always fighting wars on other people's soil in order to protect its native population. This is a lesson that was kind of learned in World War II, as one of the understandings from the appeasement process, which is if you are to fight, do it somewhere else, not only to keep your industry and infrastructure safe for your war machine, but also it's nicer to your own population at the expense of other countries' populations. And this is something that we're able to do because we made it out so well from World War II, partially because our factories weren't bombed to the ground, and also we were able to mobilize large volumes of our economic infrastructure into military purposes, and that kind of never stopped. A lot of the things that many of our economic sectors have in America are the military-industrial complex, which was warned about, I believe, by Dwight D. Eisenhower in his parting speech to the American people. He said, I've witnessed in my lifetime the rise of the military-industrial complex. I cannot see its end in any state of the near future. Of course, this was during the Cold War, so you kind of have to keep that in mind. But I believe it was also Eisenhower who has a quote, in the final sense, every warship launched, every gun created is, in the ultimate sense, taking the bread from a mouth of a child who is starving, or the clothes off the back of someone who needs it, which is essentially, whether true or not, his belief, at least, was, I believe this is in 1956, I want to say, the 1950s, regardless, that each person, or each dollar spent on the defense budget can, and in his, based on his words, should be spent on social services, or the public sector, to take people's lives from one standard of living and elevate it to another, either through education or direct assistance. I particularly happen to like this quote. It is a little complicated when you start getting deeper and deeper into economics, because value and the creation of value is difficult to pin down, but it's kind of no secret that America's many parts of its economic sector, particularly in certain parts of the country, California is my example of growing up, is part of the oh wow, we're getting spotted from somewhere. Propped up by several military industrial complex contractors, and it's not seen as, you know, true value, or value that is somewhat artificial. But yeah, it's, I don't know, it's an interesting question. You know, like, is defense worth spending on if you're not using it, right? Is it kind of a function that's always on and always good? Well, we have 13 seconds to get out of here, so we better put on the gas. You know, is it only good when you use it, basically? And then, of course, there is the point of that documentary, The Coming War on China, which is, if you're spending so much on something, you usually find targets for those things. I discussed earlier that, like, if you have a very big hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. Oh, the Shinano Mei, it's over here. I think they up tier us over here. Yeah, I've stopped launching torpedoes against destroyers that are in close quarters combat like this, because it's just a little... It's... Every second should be DPS on the guns, basically. Alright, there we go. So I think we'll put out the fire, just because our damage control is free. Oh, wow. Friendly torpedoes. So anyway, yeah, that's one of the aspects of military history is, if your defense budget is really high, you could spin it as you're creating jobs in the economy, and that creates wealth. But you could also spin it like America is huge amounts of debt that is always increasing, and that there's a lot of that is military spending. But that's one of the things that you get when you have the largest military in the world, is it's expensive, right? And that's one of the ways that we won the Cold War from Russia, is by outspending them to the point where, in order to create parity with mutually assured destruction, we could spend them into the ground. And that allowed us to use debt and borrowing to defeat an enemy without having to, like, necessarily engage them in military conflict. So yeah, I don't know, like, it's kind of an open thing, because money is negotiable in its value in the first place, so you kind of have to decide whether or not guaranteeing money to another country based on your defense of that country, you know, without whom there would be no one to pay back the bills, is worth it. No, I don't actually know the answer to that question. That's a difficult one. It's a complicated one, because it speaks to many fundamental things that our world is built on. One of which is the idea of that money should be consistent in its value, that a dollar is actually worth a dollar and it's actually tradable to something, and that can work internationally. There's one of the things that I have to decide is whether to focus on military history or economic history. Oh, we got tagged by this nice snow. Yeah, maybe we shouldn't have opened up on him directly, but we are getting pretty close. And I kind of wanted to just start a fire. Let's take out the Jervis. So, yeah. Anyway, the documentary is quite good. Everyone should watch it on the Marshall Islands. It's about how the islanders were tested for radiation sickness and poisoning, and the belief that I think has some credit and some water under it that America knew that this area would be irradiated for a very long time, and LBJ allowed them to return to the islands that were used in the nuclear testing. Just in case you don't know, Bikini Atoll was used as a nuclear bomb test site by the United States government in the 50s, and people still lived on that island chain. Surprise, surprise. And when a lot of bombs went off around that area, it irradiated the area. And to this day, the Ronald Reagan, I think, missile test site, or one of the like fundamental parts of the Space Forces and the Air Force, is still in the Marshall Islands. And, you know, you could talk about whether that's good for the island or bad for the island, bringing in jobs, but then also like polluting and using their environment, or taking that land from people who might want to use it who are local. But yeah, this is, again, a political, complicated topic that many people have different opinions and beliefs about. If you ask lots of the local islanders, they really don't care, and they would like to have their native way of life back and to have that island back in their hands, and they wish that, you know, America could kind of never come there in the first place, and certainly not dropped a bunch of atomic bombs on that location and then, you know, kind of use them as human guinea pigs to study the effects of radiation uptake on the human body. Granted, during the Cold War, you know, that could have been seen as a small price to pay for the science involved. And Fallout, many games, one of my favorites is Fallout, talk specifically about the things that were done in the name of science during this time period, partially because people were very, very afraid of what the future was going to look like with nuclear weapons on it. And yeah, another subject in the documentary is the U.S. bases on Okinawa and the popular response in that community to asking those bases to go away or getting rid of those bases. There's a few, you know, crime and or safety issues and environmental or pollution issues that are created anytime you have a large base from another country in your country. And there's suspected to be some levels of corruption in the Japanese government that are, rather than serving the needs of the community and those local people, serving Japan as a whole, or potentially individual politicians being vulnerable to bribes in the Japanese government. So there's some issues, right? And also, like, there's some sexual assault cases and crimes that occur when you get large groups of American soldiers in a foreign country with local women, and that is always a point of friction between some of the local communities, which is why it's so important that soldiers behave and conduct themselves to the highest standards, because they do actually represent the country that they are a part of, which is much, much larger than just individually themselves. If you're wearing the US flag, you have to go out of your way and be extra careful to do it correctly and to bring honor to the flag rather than disgrace it. And that's the thing, is like crimes do happen in every population, but it's especially egregious when that population represents something very big like a whole country. Growing up in San Diego, it could be a rough spot where the bars where the soldiers hang out, or certain Marines, and it's not necessarily it's a complicated social issue because there's lots of PTSD or factors at stake or psychological things. But yeah, it's could be a powder keg recipe for disaster. And more kind of connected to this topic is I'd like to talk about the organization structure of what work I can have. I watched a documentary on Bobby Fischer, who later in his life became like this pretty direct anti-Semite and kind of went off the deep end a little bit, mentally speaking. And one of the things that he did quite a lot is ramble about major political or historical issues with kind of the alt-right's calling card of a giant Jewish state that's controlling the government and everything like that. And so I'd like to hopefully organize and avoid a rambling structure that gets too egregious to the ear, and can be more palatable and well researched. And the big barrier to that is scripting. So one of the things that I've declined to do or neglected to do so far is create one specific topic, script it out, make a cohesive argumentative structure like I did with speech and debate, or indeed my college courses, and then argue from there some of these kind of provocative and challenging topics, like, is the US government knowledgeably irradiating Marshall Islanders in order to study them in the 1960s? For that one, we have lots of video documentation and evidence because America was kind enough to literally record what they were doing to the Bikini Islanders and the Marshall Islanders. And some of the videos are really funny not funny obviously because of what's happening, but just in that very particular 1950s way of saying this is for science, and the savages are happy to help the white man understand the world better, and it's very do 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 do, the kind of 1950s documentary movie soundtrack, which I love. That's one of the reasons I love history, is because I think that those old films and videos are so funny. Oh, okay, got one. Oh, he knocked out a gun and flooding. Looks like we're getting the benefits of that flooding. But yeah, that's a great example, right? Having our train of thought be interrupted by the events in the game. A few of my friends have recommended some video editing software and some scripting, which of course would require a lot more work than just physically doing it. It's just something that I talked about a few days and weeks ago, partially because the job of a YouTuber, a modern content creator, is really, I think, two jobs, one of which is either hiring someone to do your editing and or moderating and just help you with the project while you create the project, or to do both and be a YouTuber and a Twitch streamer, which then increases your searchability by a lot and also gives people a reason to go to your stream first rather than just kind of randomly finding it on a whim. Or it makes you searchable in some key important ways. It also gives people a reason to kind of respect or seek your authority. And I'll confess that is how I found most of the people I follow on Twitch, is by their YouTube videos first. partially because that's just how I kind of operate. It's how I work in the world. Is I usually search for things that I need to know for a project that I'd like to do, rather than just searching the internet for things to hang out with or interesting stuff like that. Like I'll go to some Twitch streams just to have access to a video game that I don't own, that I was thinking about owning, and that can be useful and nice. But it's very rare for me to kind of engage with Twitch in that way. And also Twitch is such a fundamentally different space because it's improvisational rather than, you know, scripted. Oh wow. Did he know I was here? Oh. Hmm. Yeah, we might not be able to make this. Oh, we're losing by so much anyway. Doesn't really. Maybe we could get a ram. That could work. Oh, well, we got some torpedoes. Those worked. Okay. Well, the best of a bad situation. So yeah, I'd like some. I mean, I guess asking for feedback is kind of a cliche, partially because. But like, what do you guys think? If you do have any opinions about seeing a cohesive scripted thing as the preferred method of intake, or just kind of keeping the stream of consciousness kind of living style together. And I also have to admit that a lot of this project is somewhat selfish for me, in the sense that I'm like doing what I can do, what I'm willing to do, basically what I'm willing to offer in the first place, and then kind of exploring that rather than doing what I think would be the most successful or popular objectively for the world and to get new subscribers and new people on board. So yeah, that's just kind of the reality of the situation. And a lot of this is just like being functional at all anyway. Like many days I find that I don't actually have the motivation or strength to get anything outputted, either production-wise or at all. And that's one of the functions of like depression and kind of losing my job, and you know, having a kind of instability experience with 2020 and COVID-19. And so getting anything done ever at all, even if it is not, you know, the ideal version of the product that I should be putting out or can be putting out, is some days difficult for me, or too difficult that I don't do it. So a lot of that question then turns into, well, do I stream or do nothing? Or do I talk about the things that I'm actually interested in and care about in life and society and history, because I feel a sense of urgency about them, and also I do have some knowledge to share and impart? Or do I just, you know, restrict it only to the game that's being played and kind of not volunteer any of the knowledge that I have because it's not in the right format, or it's not in the right structure, it doesn't have the right container? And that's kind of a different question, because I could just be a World of Warships streamer. I play World of Warships enough. I'm not like flawless and amazing at it, of course. I don't like immediately win every single game. But, you know, if you watch Notzer or Flamu or any of the big World of Warships streamers, you know, they they win about 60%, maybe 70%. And you know, our last stream I went 6-2, so that's pretty good. So I'm kind of at that area or at that level. I would just have to focus in a little bit more on my gameplay and not make stupid decisions and choices, and kind of, you know, care more about the outcomes rather than caring more about talking about the things that I learned in the last few days that I believe are really important to the world in general, and then using World of Warships as kind of the template background to express some of those ideas. Because in some ways I use World of Warships like a kind of a doll, like a toy, like models, right? Like using these digital model ships and smashing them together in the bathtub and seeing who, you know, comes out on top, who wins. All right, we're getting picked up by aircraft carriers again this match. This is a 2 aircraft carrier match, so I guess it's to be expected that DDs are just not going to have a good time here. And that's, you know, one of the notorious things that we're sad about about aircraft carriers is that it kind of shuts off DDs if there's 2 aircraft carriers on the map. I have to play way back with my group. I'd actually just gunboat this. The reason we're doing that is because we're well within our team. We have lots of support, and if that aircraft carrier is there, it's not going to make us really that stealthy anyway. And I don't believe that I can successfully torpedo this Furutaka because it's, you know, cruisers are hard to get. This cruiser is a low-tier cruiser, which means it's, you know, pretty agile. And we got our first blood. It's very nice. So the Izumal, I do think I can torpedo. I have a good chance of torpedoing that one. And I also want to make it think that I'm going at it so that it starts thinking about its positioning relative to me and not its positioning relative to either the Normandy or the Izumal, so that they could potentially get better angles and side shots. Let's just drop our smoke. We go all the way to reverse when we're dropping smoke because, and I usually put in a hard turn because it's the fastest way to slow the ship down. And if you see that white arrow on the bottom left right here, that arrow will be when your speed will keep up with the smoke. We dodged our torpedoes very correctly. Oh, okay. Okay, but this is small. That's okay. Still important to just get away from Gizmo. You can try to set some fires, maybe burn it down a little faster. We're aiming for the bow of the nose because it is very highly angled, which would be a problem if we had armor piercing on. If we don't have armor piercing on, we have high explosive, and the only thing high explosive cares about is the physical thickness of the armor, not how angled it is. So when you have low caliber, high explosive, it benefits you to try that out on the bow, like right here, or the stern, right here, of the ship because it is comparatively much thinner than much of the deck armor. And it can be thin because it's highly angled, which gives it a greater relative thickness. But if you're using high explosive, you don't care about that stuff. And if you can't find any of those spaces, you can always aim for the superstructure on the tops, of course. But, you know, sometimes the superstructure is protected by the gun mantlets, which are very thick. Oh, Hatsuharu getting our guns back online. Okay, so we're using this island as cover from the New Mexico Gilio Cesare. Two Gilio Cesares, actually. And so yeah, look up Okinawa-based protests, look up Marshall Islands radiation experiments. It'll be good for your understanding of kind of this getting out of the idea that America's kind of always correct in many ways, even though I still believe that we're correct lots and lots of times, and that China does have some human rights violations that it really needs to clear up. It's also kind of a bit unkind to a rising global superpower to hem them in on all sides of the Pacific Ocean when really it should probably be split in half. But America's very kind of defensive-minded and scared and a bit overly defensive in the sense that we're keen on keeping our #1 spot in the world for military stuff, even when we don't have the highest population and it's kind of costing us a lot of money. But, you know, that money is supposed to be going into American companies, so is cycling, and is that really the economy anyway? Can money ever really be spent, or can it just be shuffled around to different parts of your economy? And then, of course, you have to say, well, which part would you like to encourage? Would you like to encourage the militaristic part that has lots of like consequences with American citizens and PTSD, or would you like to help people who are starving to death not starve to death? But then you have to entertain the concept that maybe that would just get them hooked on government-funded food and not actually go out and quote-unquote be useful to the world. And then you have to say, well, what is being useful to the world anyway? Is it just making a bunch of shoes? Or, you know, providing hamburgers for McDonald's? Or would people actually be a lot more useful if they were able to access food and housing at a affordable rate? Oh, that smoke went away immediately. So we'll replace the smoke, hopefully cover the emerald escape. And the Gilio turned away from our torpedoes. So yes, long story short, the world is very complicated. It's difficult to know exactly what to do, and that's what people are fighting about a lot. Also, for posterity's sake, I think it's important to note the Trump supporters broke into the state Senate, or sorry, the Senate in Washington, D.C., the Capitol building in America yesterday. And so that was a thing that happened. And, you know, depending on your perspective of whether you voted Republican or Democrat, but I think at this point, even if you did vote Republican, you might want to just accept the election results, even if they weren't in your favor, kind of be a good sport about it, and like just say, you know what, maybe sedition and like a tearing apart of the fabric of America might not be worth just 4 more years of the guy you like in charge. Maybe there's things that are more important than that. Like ceding the results of an election by like 6 million votes, you know, but that's just me. I am allowed to hold my bias. So yeah, it's I, you know, completely biasedly, I hope that this kind of feeling delegitimizes the Republican Party to the extent that we start getting a new Republican Party, or a new party in the space that conservatism through the Republican Party occupies currently, partly because Republicanism has changed and morphed a lot of what it originally stood for, not just in the context of the Cold War, but also with the War on Terror through George W. Bush. And it's not about small government policies and practices anymore. It's actually about large government spending and pretty direct support of increase in the military. Not that Democrats don't do that also, which is something that I also have a problem with. But at least the lip service or the identity of the party is low taxes for everyone, which includes low taxes on the hyper wealthy and a reduction in the size of the government, which simply means that the structures that are on the ground right now that were created from 300 years of slavery or direct, like, on the books racism, instead of being corrected through government policies and programs, are just frozen in time and allowed to be the advantaged state that the past has created for a select group of people. And that, I don't think, is the right way to go about it. Of course, anytime you try to change something, it's vulnerable to criticism, like with affirmative action programs or, giving money to any one group or people based on their need, and whether that, kind of asks them or trains them to be dependent on the state, and how dangerous or successful that is kind of up to your individual political opinion. But my argument would be that we are already extremely dependent on the state. We, in many ways, have been since the 1800s, and the state already exercises like severe powers of control and authority over individual citizens. Whether we like it or not, eminent domain is a thing. If the government wants to build a highway through your house, they will give you like 50% of that value of that house and then tell you to move within 3 months, and you have to do it. It is a law. So given that state, given that position, I think that it is in some ways only realistic to kind of acknowledge and admit that the government can and has been in control of citizens' lives forever, like through most of the history of statehood, and that is, instead of kind of burying your head in the sand or pretending that that's not true and that you can pull yourselves up by your own bootstraps or survive in a world without the state in some way, I think it's important to recognize the truth and validity of the situation and kind of work with it, and say, well, okay, because states have now become so powerful after World War II or World War I, and if you go to Europe, like, they have always been this powerful in many ways, we kind of have to make that system work for us rather than against us. But that's just my opinion, even though it's more educated than it used to be, and I strive to educate it more each day. But yeah, that's just how I think the world actually physically works, which is the government will create a law to do whatever it feels like it needs to do, and that is just how states are. And if you're going to be in this world and a citizen of a state, it might benefit you to start looking at ways that the state can improve its citizens' lives, rather than just kind of ignoring them and taking a, I'd say, pretty outdated economic approach in laissez-faire ideology. Yeah, I don't know. I think that small governments can't help anyone, and like after in the post-World War II world, you really don't want your government to be small anyway. Like, you really don't, because it's vulnerable to large governments or fascism. But again, like, there's boundaries and there's ways in which each of those things can go off the deep end. Like communist Russia is a good example of an authoritarian state that is very, very large and in everybody's lives, and you and controls people very directly. That's actually one of the things that came up in the Bobby Fischer documentary, is kind of the difference between the East and West, right? So there's this big chess tournament between communism and America, represented by Bobby Fischer. And in the American one, he got to keep all the prize money, right? And that's very, many people liked that. Many people said that he's going to fight harder because he's going to win $200,000 if he wins. And Bobby Fischer often told the chess association, you need to increase the prize money or I won't play. And they're like, well, if you won't play, we're going to disqualify you and you won't be the world champion anymore. And there's like back and forth negotiations about that. And on the communist side, the player who's winning doesn't actually get the money. The state gets the money and the team gets the money. And like it's just seen as this kind of example of you doing what you want to do regardless of its monetary concerns or outcomes. And you can feel lots of different ways about that, right? You can have this kind of spiritual belief that that's more pure and that's like what chess really should be about. And then you could also have this idea that the person who's responsible for being so great and amazing at chess isn't benefiting proportionally from his genius. But when you look at the stories of both of those people, Bobby Fischer had to do all of his own stuff himself. He had no support. He had to hire all the people that he wanted to help him. And he did, but that was at his own personal expense. Whereas if you're a communist chess player, you're supported by this huge team of people. You have access to all these resources that help you prepare and give you a nice stable place to live. Like, one of the things that impacted Bobby Fischer's mental health is suspected to be the fact that he literally never had a place to live. And so he, was a nomad and traveled around to all these various different places. One of the places that he stayed at was a fundamentalist church, which is when he started getting all crazy about, different ideas and opinions about the world. I wish that he had gone to some history classes so that he could find the answers to those things that he was asking about the world in ways that are based in fact and documented research, or if they're wrong, that he could have the tools to help improve them, right, in a safe and rational, realistic way, rather than, or an evidence-based way, rather than just kind of believing people on the radio that have some very specific political goals that they'd like you to agree with them and further their opinions, which is one of the things I try to avoid on this channel, is by including original source documents, by including names, dates, places, and times, and encouraging people to genuinely put themselves in contact with the original source documents themselves. You can take whatever your opinion is and educate it. Even if it doesn't change, at least it will be more informed. And that's, one of the great, beautiful, and horrible things about reality, is that depending on your perspective, the same argument could be used for either liberal or conservative narratives. And then you just kind of have to pick which one you like more right now, or agree with more, or which one you think that the world needs the most. And that is its own complicated process that each person kind of has to do for themselves. But yeah, I think that's one of the most important things in creating a state of being, is recognizing that everything in your life is forced to be political by definition, because it is you. It is a person. It is yourself. It is, often money related and money focused, which is a question of resources, which politics has a huge influence in, whether your country gets access to good trade routes, or certain economic influences in other countries can greatly determine your state of being. And even the choice to be apolitical or non-political is itself a political choice, because you're refusing to influence the status quo and the state of being that has been created by people before you were born. So you then have to reconcile with those consequences. Leaving everything alone and just freezing it isn't always necessarily correct, because we still have these lingering consequences of hundreds and hundreds of years of direct political action that's extremely intentional to either suppress one group of people and increase another group of people. Oh, wow. Alright, well, that was surprising. But yeah, all those things are, in my opinion, pretty important, because they determine your mark on the world and what you would prefer or like to do about it. Oh, are we gonna be able to dodge this one? Nope, it doesn't look like it. Okay. Just a few inches. Rough. Yeah, one of the problems with the French destroyers is that their detection is pretty big, because they believe in, what's it? The capital destroyer idea, that each destroyer is pretty big, so that when it meets another destroyer, it can beat it. And it has, more guns or good guns or more health. But in World of Warships, that means that you get spotted first, which means that you get targeted by cruisers and battleships. And it also means that that pushes you towards islands. Islands, for the Agile at least, or the Aigle, has a very high arcing rate of fire. It's kind of played like a American cruiser a little bit, in the sense that you want to be around islands. When you're around islands, you kind of ask for they're very suspicious torpedo target spots. So that group of 2 destroyers kind of filled the area around the islands with torpedoes, and I didn't see them in time. And we didn't have hydroacoustic anyway, which is a good pair for kind of island hiding or island humping. But, So yeah, a lot of, the things that I've been experiencing after having these long speeches or streaming at all is by kind of opening up and exposing parts of my mind and parts of my heart and parts of what I think about the world in a very sincere, genuine way. It makes it scary afterwards. Did I say the right thing? Is someone going to misinterpret the beliefs that I have or use them against me later in some ways? And part of the thing that I'm afraid about teaching or doing history at a professional level at all is that someone can endeavor to punish you after you're done saying something. And that's one of the things that scripting has as an advantage also, is at least you can spend some time really focusing in on what you actually want to say and be held accountable for after the fact, rather than just saying whatever comes to mind or stringing together ideas in loose ways and kind of having the constant pressure of live performance on you. as you're coming up with these ideas and concepts, and then trying to kind of hobble together some sense of consistency and semblance after that. Oh, this... Okay, there's an aircraft carrier on this one also. Seems like the aircraft carriers love to come find me. And so yeah, that's it's one of the dangers, to be quite honest. It's pretty scary to be quoted out of context, you know, or to like live and exist in the public eye in a political way like politicians do. You know, there's lots of footage or data that's recorded about you that could come back to haunt you. And if you talk for a long time, the chances of you saying something stupid might go up a lot. And there's no way to work hard enough to make yourself always correct every time you speak, unless you just don't speak. That's one of the things in the Vi Fisher documentary also, which is the only person who never loses at chess is someone who never plays. So in some ways you have to be safe enough to admit and acknowledge that somewhere along the line you will make a mistake and you will say something that you either wish you hadn't or disagree with later after you've researched more. And there's no way to research fully everything ahead of time in your life to be able to eliminate those mistakes, because you'd be an extremely old man by the time you're done with that, and even then you probably would never be done. So you would never say anything in your life of any meaning or note or consequence. Right now I'm kind of shortcutting that by saying things that other people have said, like the quotes from Dwight D. Eisenhower about every warship launched being a robbery of a starving child from his food, or you know, things of that nature. I'd like it if our group killed this Talon. I don't know if my torpedoes are gonna get to him. Maybe I should focus on the Roma. He's kind of close, but he's going away from us. Okay, there we go. Nice. Oh, now the York's gonna give us trouble. Smoke generator activated. So yes, so these are my struggles. I've actually started, like, you know, maybe thinking of this as just a video diary. If it can't be a good stream for history because it's not scripted, and it can't be a whoa, what's up, Spicy Wing 69, hello. So, you know, if it can't be like a 100% amazing gameplay video because I'm not like the best at World of Warships compared to some of the professional streamers, then maybe at least it could be a record of like the struggles that I'm going through and like self-actualizing. And well, so we're talking about what the stream's identity is going to be in some ways. Because like part of me wants to talk about trying to be a history teacher and a history professor and getting into grad school in 2019 or in COVID-19 and 2020 and 2021 now, and how difficult that can be, but also like whether gameplay or Twitch streaming is really the right medium for that, or if I should do scripted YouTube videos that have like very specific points and are highly directed. I do have a history degree from the University of California, but I'm not a teacher yet. I'm kind of working on it. Part of the reason that I didn't become a teacher for a long time is because I wanted to be older. When I taught students, I don't want to be like really young. Um, yeah. Well, that's the thing is like history is, it's one of those things where like I think everyone just by living kind of knows some history just because like you have to, right? Like if you're in a country and you're a citizen of a country, you kind of know the history of that country, right? From your parents and also from like what it means to be a person in this world is that, like people want to know where they come from in some way, or like, seeing like movies that are set in like the medieval times or like Rome or 1700s or even like World War II, those are stories that shaped and influenced like a lot of the world. So if you like are watching Saving Private Ryan like as an American movie or like a German movie or Russian movie, you know, a lot of them are about World War II because it was very traumatic. It was like this big experience for the world, and people remember that stuff, and so like you kind of absorb it. You like pick it up from your environment about like what it means to be from the country that you're from, or like an American, or what it means to, be poor versus being rich, or what it means to be either educated or not educated, or a worker versus someone who owns a business. Like those are different stories, I guess we could say, in the world. And like that's the thing that I'm really excited about in life, is to kind of help people understand those stories, is to help them kind of understand they're part of this big picture, this glorious tapestry of humanity and the world, and this common communal human experience that stretches all the way back through time to like ancient Roman times, or ancient Chinese times, and that is this beautiful experience that we can have as humans to recognize our place in that particular story, cloth, and thread. So I think it's really cool. I like it a lot. It's something I've devoted hundreds and hundreds of hours to, and lots of time and focus, worrying about it, and thinking, am I doing it right? Is it really correct to say these things? Yeah, the greatest part of history is that it never ends, since every day that passes has always been part of history. Exactly. So see, that's also one of the exciting things is we're always on the bleeding edge of history, and no one knows what's going to come next, or no one's what's going to happen next. My history professor has a great quote, which is, why should you study history? One of them is, you will study history if you wish to know the past, to understand the present, and to anticipate the future. And so if time is very important to you, and like me, I have a lot of anxiety about the future for like nuclear weapons and like Great Depression stuff that might happen after COVID-19, and like things like that, I view history as one of the safest and most reliable ways to figure out what's going to happen in the future later. Because by studying the past, we can, in some ways more accurately predict the behavior of the future. Because one of the best indicators of future behavior is past behavior. It's not always true, and it is in fact always different, because history learns from itself, and they never repeat things like exactly. They repeat like little things kind of around them, or like with them on the side, kind of in conjunction with them, like dancing. The present dances with the past. It doesn't immediately exactly copy it, but they do go together. So yeah, in science. So I used to study quite a lot of science. In biology, I have actually a degree. Well, actually, no, I was getting a 2-year degree in medicine. Um, and I like worked at the hospital. I actually was recently let go from the hospital because of COVID-19. They couldn't afford our department anymore, so they shut it down. But chemistry and physics are really interesting to me when I was in high school. But I found that I didn't have the backing to do both history and science in college at the same time. I just like I couldn't afford any of the books, and I was like desperately surviving, and like it was a bad time. It was really rough for me, and like my mental health was not all the way there to really output the kind of rigor that science had in store for me. And also, like, I had not taken a science class at the end of high school for a very long time because I tested out of all my sciences really, really early. And then I focused on being an actor in high school, and a speech and debate person for kind of the end part of my career. So I did more writing. I did AP Economics and AP, or Advanced Placement is AP, English and History and Political Science. And by the time I got to college and I had to do my science requirements, I actually couldn't understand a lot of the science that was being done because I did not take those classes for a very long time. A levels before, but it's the equivalent of the AP or SAT. Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, I hadn't heard of those. I'm somewhat concerned that school has changed a lot since I got out of it, and that I might be kind of behind on the structure of how it works. But yeah, like I did well in my SATs in science courses. It's just that that wasn't really my focus, and like I took one like astrophysics class, but I could not get there for the life of me. It was so early in the morning and it was all across campus, and I like got really sick during it, and so I like failed that class. And I intentionally failed it, but it was not an easy course for me. It was taught by like one of the top researchers in astrophysics at the University of California. I have no idea why I was teaching an introductory level survey course, but it was quite challenging for me. Oh, nice. Yeah, towards medicine, biology, physics, chemistry, and mathematics. Yeah, chemistry is really interesting, and I love physics. One of my best friends, actually a physicist, and one of my other friends is going into organic chemistry right now, or physical chemistry, and it's really amazing and beautiful. And I mean, science is like literally the keys to the world. Like it is, if not directly, it is certainly one of the most interesting and capable tools that humans will ever wield and have access to. Of course, a lot of the history that I study was before humans invented science very much in the first place. So, the world really changed once we got a hold of scientific process and scientific theory. But it's also just, it's important to note how much it can actually shape and improve everyday people's lives, increasing their lifespan. And physics is really hard, but it's worth it. If you know physics, like, you can do, I think, anything in the world. Like, and it's also very lucrative. Physics is one of the best paying fields, or it can be, partially because of the military-industrial complex's omnipresent need to understand how things physically work in the world, to create better and better weapons and technology. Which, if you're in America or in California, is a very lucrative field to go in. And also, like, energy consumption. My dad works in nuclear power, and it's, highly, highly necessary and highly needed for the state of the modern world that we find ourselves in. It's it's always useful to know the physical part. The kind of the words part is it's a little more difficult to find the proof of the usefulness of that one because it's very subjective. Everyone has their own opinions and beliefs and ideas about it. But I don't know. I like it. I think identity is important for people in their life. Like, because it kind of shapes and changes how you use the science. Because like science is how to do something, but knowing what you should do or which directions to go. Interested in physics because of desire for nuclear fusion. It's pretty much the future. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's like I said. Like my dad literally, he's an electrical engineer, but he works in nuclear power. And yeah, I think I don't know. It's a lot of the problems that we have in the world right now are kind of created from the solutions that we found in the past to deal with, like having electricity or warmth or how to make your, country's warships run. And a lot of that was like burning coal for a long time or burning oil, which of course has its consequences in climate change and, an increase of greenhouse gases into our environment because everyone was doing that. If you wanted a navy, it had better run on either coal and then later oil. But if we can change that, then we can kind of alleviate some of the problems that we might be having in the world that could be pretty bad. It could be if some of the predictions for climate change are correct, we might be facing a lot of those consequences either already or very soon in the form of like, superstorms or hurricanes. And skills in programming. Yeah, actually, most of the people in my house are actually computer science engineers. In fact, everyone but me has a degree in computer science. So they're all programmers. And like you can learn it at different levels. Like not every programming is like the maximum elite hacking level of programming. Like it's, when I was in high school, I learned some light programming just to make websites or to make code that I like to run, and it is fun in some way. Like it's like a little puzzle, and you can like kind of learn that puzzle in a variety of different ways depending on how serious and crazy you want to get into it. Like everything in life, it's as big as you want to make it, kind of. Like you kind of go like really hard in the paint with everything, or you can just kind of chill and like not it's just like do the programming that gets you what you want and to do, and then you can like worry about the rest later. But yeah, one of my friends is a computer science programmer and biology major, so she's a double major, and her sister is an astrophysicist and asks for her help all the time with programming to organize data sets about like the moons of Uranus or Europa or Saturn, just to organize it all, which is one of the things that computers are really good at doing, is organizing all the data. So yeah, that's like it. I like to tell everyone, have hope. You can always learn anything in the world if you let yourself. If you make it a priority in your life and you say, I can do this, people can change very dramatically. Like for example, in my life, I was an actor for a very long time. And before that I was a dancer. And before that I was, into sports a lot. I played a lot of soccer. I thought, I was very good at soccer. I got, some scholarships and things. And then before that, I was like really, really religious, and I was really into that. And I was like, well, maybe I'll be a pastor or something. Can I disclose what I want to achieve in life? Yeah, absolutely. There's life goals. Hashtag life goals. I'm just gonna shoot over this island, hopefully stay safe. Yeah, and that's the thing, is like, I always, in hoping to become a teacher or a professor, you deal with kind of people's dreams, like education is such a personal and kind of scary thing in a lot of people's lives, because it's really the question of like, can I do this, right? Can I be successful? Can I show or prove or perform these things? But if you look at like Einstein's grades, they were not that great. And so a lot of it isn't about like getting straight A's. A lot of it is about like sticking with something that you care about for a long period of time, and then having that work for you. And it's something that, like, of course, everyone wants A's. Everyone wants to, ace everything. But if an A means that you already know something, you're not really learning anything. Things that you... Well, I guess learning something very, very quickly. The problem for me is, like, I learn actually quite slowly in lots of ways. Like, the things, or the way that I learn is, I take a while to get up to speed on some stuff because of my ADD, and I was able to get some compensation benefits from the college when I got over the pride of not having to ask for them, and I decided that I'd rather have the things for my mental disorder that help me succeed rather than continuing to get like B's and C's in life. And a lot of that is about pride, for me at least, is the pride of being smart. Whether or not I can do something without medicine, or whether or not I need help or special treatment or special rules to get the stuff done that I want to get done. And I think now that I'm older, and I feel like I think about it more in terms of like, I want this thing to be in my life, and how can I achieve that is more important than, being stubborn about how I achieve it. And, part of that is my own fault. I was very prideful in my youth. I believed that I could do anything and that I should be able to do anything. And, I just need to kind of punish myself hard enough to do it. I was kind of mean to myself for a while. And that's, that's kind of not... That just doesn't have to be how the world is. Like, you don't have to be angry with yourself for a long period of time. It doesn't, or rather, it can in the short term make you more productive and like achieve more. Yeah, that like, yeah, I don't know. It's a complicated question, because like there is some sense that like pride drives you forward, that like the reason that you accomplish things and like have goals in your life and have like these ideas about who you want to be is in some way driven by pride, right? Because you want to be proud of yourself and you want to do things in the world, and you find out that you can do hard things in the world, but they almost always have some sacrifices or consequences that come with them, and that becomes its own question about whether or not you want to kind of do those sacrifices, and that could have different answers depending on the day or the time period. So there's no one answer about it. I think that each time I've asked myself that question, it kind of fluctuates throughout the time that I'm alive, where I'm like, well, I'm willing to study and not go out to parties like on this night for, a while, but then eventually I will kind of want to go to some parties, at least a little bit, or that it becomes important enough to my survival socially to stay friends with my roommates and to have a roof over my head and, some sense of social belonging, that maybe studying isn't the call for that evening, and that I go out instead to socialize or, hang out with my girlfriend, or to get a girlfriend, or to, have all these other parts of life. A lot of it then turns into kind of a balancing act of kind of negotiating these different aspects of your life and your world. Partially because, like, I don't know, if you have a job and you're paying all of rent for that because you don't have a girlfriend or you don't have anyone to live with you, that means you have to make twice as much money because you have no one to split rent with. So in some ways, being social can actually save you money if and also improve your life in other ways that professional work can't always, Yeah, definitely. And school can be both for sure. Yeah, one of the problems with school for Americans, though, is that school can get pretty expensive pretty quick. And that's one of the struggles also, is that the idea that college is something that you borrow first and then spend the rest of your life trying to pay off. And hopefully some political change will occur in America that makes that not true anymore, so that this generation and future generations won't have to suffer through the psychological and economic pressure of severe poverty that can come from being educated if you don't immediately get a job in the sector that you would like. And then, of course, your life becomes about your job because you can run out of resources very, very quickly if you don't have it, which is its own set of pressures. Oh, that's very good at stopping and smoke. But yeah, but it's important to note that everything is one step at a time. Like if you're 15, like pretty much the only thing you really need to figure out is like kind of staying out of trouble. I would say, or like keeping the different varieties of keeping your nose clean, which is like not falling prey to some of the wow, we took so much damage just from that aircraft carrier. Aircraft carriers have really been focusing us for a few parts of this game. It's rough. Yeah, we probably should have waited to use our repair party until after the airstrike was done, but what can you do? Hmm. Oh, and the aircraft carrier is back. Awesome. At least it's not targeting us. Oh, we're trying to go away from it, but I don't know why. Huh, I got stuck in the geometry of that one pretty strangely. Okay, so as a low health cruiser in this game with a bunch of targets still up, our job is to kind of be at the back, get some distance, and then rain HE fire down on the enemy, using our range to our advantage. Setting some fires and trying to stay alive for kind of as long as possible. We have a lead in the cap points, so we're well on our way to winning this game via cap. Staying behind this island could actually be very good for us. The arc of fire that we have is pretty friendly towards that. If we could just go back. There we go. So yeah. I don't know. Talking about all these things in life like work, school, success, money, all this stuff, like what you want to do in life and like who you want to be. So it can be kind of heavy, and like I totally understand that lots of people don't necessarily want to talk about that stuff when they're just playing video games and they want to like relax and not have to think about it. But I kind of believe also that like people don't think about it enough a lot of times, like, and also that they run into situations where they can't really change it or affect it as much as they would like to. Because the thing is, like, everything has to happen on some day. Like, there has to be one day where you apply for college. There has to be one day where you apply for a new job, which is what I'm doing right now. Is like because I lost my old job at the hospital, I have to apply for a new job every day, pretty much, or I lose my unemployment benefits. Like, one of the parts of the deal, at least in Colorado, is that they pay you to look for a job for 7 months. And if you don't find one in 7 months, then you are kind of out of luck. Like, you have no more money and you have to think about where you're going to live and how you're going to get food. And the idea is basically like find a job in 7 months or else die, basically, which is one of the things that I'd like to work on changing or eliminating in the culture. Is like there should never be a sentence that your government says to you that ends in the sentence or die. You know, like ideally we live in a world that is lucrative and prosperous enough that we shouldn't be in the business of telling people that they're gonna die in 7 months if they don't work at McDonald's. But as someone who has, you know, worked at grocery stores and fast food places, you know, that's one of the things that kind of pressured me to waste several years of my life working in those locations rather than doing what I'm trained to do and educated to do. And of course, you know, a lot of people are like, well, that's kind of your fault. You should be working and looking for a job at the same time. But like a lot of food service work is very exhausting. It can be very difficult to have the energy to do anything after an 8-hour shift in a kitchen. But I don't know if that's me just not wanting it enough. And also, like, I was kind of waiting to be older. This turpit seems to be harassing our Bayern over here. If I get closer to the enemy aircraft carrier, there's a higher chance that they will shoot me and kill me. So I'm kind of going to stay at the back with this Enterprise because I'm so damaged that I'd rather keep my gun in the fight and maybe fight this Leander who's coming into range, or at least provide long-range artillery fire support to C. go. It's a decent rate of fire on these German cruisers. Really enjoy that. Oh. So we want to stay behind the island so we don't get spotted. Oh, alright, we just got spotted. That's kind of bad. Means that we could be easily targeted and killed because we have so little health. Yep, and here come the shells. Let's see. So maybe we could target the Cleveland, I guess. There are some destroyers around. I'm not sure if they're the ones that are spotting me or if it's the cruisers. Look through the rear turret sights. Yep, okay. Yeah, it's the Cleveland. Start out putting some damage on the Cleveland here. Oh, it did get me. Oof. Rough. I thought we could get away with it. Oh well, at least we outputted more damage than we took, so that's always good and useful. And considering the start to our game was so terrible, we actually salvaged that situation pretty well. The rest of our team, unfortunately, didn't win as hard. But anyway, yeah, so I think that might do it for me. Thank you guys so much for listening to my, as always, history ramblings, but maybe that'll be what this just turns into. But yeah, also Spicy Wing 69, glad to meet you. Good luck in school and in all your endeavors in life. Science is a beautiful field and absolutely worth the time and attention that you give it. And I wish you luck in your future endeavors and plans. And I will see you guys later. If you want to see again, you know, like, comment, subscribe, all that cliche creator stuff. And I hope to see you later. Okay, peace.